Recording.
So does anybody want to? Okay. So there's you can do
Aradhana.
yes.
Okay. Yeah. Uh, 47. Brahmachaloka ipati sahampati Katanjali antivarang ayachata Santi jasata parajaka jatika Esetu dhamang anukampi mampajam
Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. It's a joy to have you all here, have our friends online, and to have it all together. And it's very circular, yeah. As I said, I started doing the online programs back in January when that's actually, I saw that happening here. I'm like, oh, good idea. Good ideas are worth spreading, yeah. So we started sitting together on the Uposatha. And now it's come back around, and community is like this. You know, we nurture a community, and then sometime in the future it comes back and it nurtures us. This is the principle of dana. You give, and you don't give thinking, oh, well, somebody's going to give to me in the future. It's an exchange. No, you think, well, giving is good. And then because people saw you giving, then in the future they think, oh, giving is good, and they give. And sooner or later, somebody gives to you. It comes around quite naturally. So this being the Uposatha, we've been giving Dhamma reflections. And so it's very special that you all came. You all don't usually come together on this night, but I'd like to offer a reflection of some of the things we've learned and we've been studying as we practice in the forest. A very different environment here, and I offer this, and I won't go on and on. I just tried to offer something that might be useful in your lives and might help to understand the Dhamma. So in the Dhamma, as it's taught in Theravada, there's a lot of don'ts. Like, don't be greedy, don't be angry, don't be deluded, give this up, give that up. I take the precept to stop doing this, to stop doing that. And it's easy to get caught up on that. There's a lot of don'ts, and it makes it seem like all of the Dhamma is about just subtracting things out of our mind. But this is actually, some of it is just a relic of the Pali language. Like in the Pali language, when they said friendly, they would say not hateful. And that for them, that was a thing. It wasn't a not thing, it was a thing. Not hateful is a thing. Now we say friendly, but they would say not hateful. And not hateful was a good thing. And you would say, oh, the person's so not hateful. And it would be a compliment, yeah? And so they didn't get as caught up on this. To them, the Dhamma was a very positive thing. They would talk about faith and wisdom and all of these things. And they didn't think they were just, ideas, but they were living things. Like you saw a faithful person and how they were bright and radiant. You saw a wise person, and they can tell what was right and what was wrong, and they didn't need anyone to tell them. And so I'd like to just try to give a little bit of idea of not the things we can get rid of necessarily, but also new ways that we can start thinking about the world. You know, in a positive sense, what does it look like to think like a Dhamma practitioner? And I said linking this to what it's like in the forest, because we have a very special perspective on this. So when we're out in the forest, we get to see nature, and we get to see nature's cycles. What could that mean? Well, one thing I'd just like to ask you, wherever you are, is how do you feel? You're not just listening to me. This is not just passive. Like, who are you? Like, how do you feel right now? Do your knees hurt? Are you tired? You know, a long day at work, or maybe you live on the other side of the world, and you know, work is just starting. Yeah. Are you hungry? Are you worried about something? You know, what is it like right now? So when we're in the forest, we get to see the forest. Yeah? Bright sunny days, leaves on the trees, and there's grasshoppers, and there's butterflies, and it's all those birds chirping. It's all pretty, yeah. But then the sun goes down. And what happens? The moon comes up. And now, if we thought the forest was the leaves and the sun and the trees and the birds, then what is it at night? Well, something totally different. But new animals come out. The crickets come out, and the mice and the voles and the porcupines come out. The birds are replaced by owls. Yeah? And instead of the sun, we have the moon. Or sometimes not even the moon, just the stars. If another question I ask you is, which is the real forest? Is it the daytime forest, or is it the nighttime forest? Which one's the real forest? And if that seems like a funny idea, this is how we think. And so I ask you, how do you feel? Because how you feel right now, is that different from how you felt this morning? So which was the real you? Is the real you the morning you? Or is the real you the evening you when you get done from work? Which one's the real you? Well, you're probably like, well, monks are always talking in riddles. I don't know. And that's okay, because you can't know. Yeah? This is what it means to be ignorant. This is what ignorance is talking about. We're only ignorant when we don't think about something. And the moment we start thinking about something, we're not ignorant. The moment we've been taught something, we know it and we can't unknow it. So we'll start thinking in new ways. And this is the positive side of the Dhamma, the new ways that we can start thinking. So another example might be a tree, right? So you see the tree when it has all of its leaves and it's green. But in the winter, what is the tree? You know, all the leaves come down. Which is the real tree? So the very wise ones among you is like, oh, he's going to start talking about aging. Yeah? Because monks like to talk about aging and sickness and death, don't they? Yeah. Why? Because it's universal. It happens to trees, and it happens to people, and it happens to chipmunks. Everybody experiences it, so it's always applicable. But now, think of the tree. We don't worry too much about the tree, unless it's like a priceless tree. It's like our little bonsai that starts losing its leaves, and then we're like, that's suffering. Yeah. But just a normal tree in the street corner, we don't suffer very much when it loses its leaves. But do we think it's become a different tree? No. So this is the same thing when we start to ask ourselves, like the people in our lives. Do we start thinking of them differently? Do we have an idea of ourselves that actually is from a long time ago? And are we suffering because the us that we have now doesn't match? And if we get to the end of the day and we're tired, do we say, it shouldn't be this way? Oh, I wish I had more energy. I could get so much done. Or do we see the morning me and the evening me are the same me? The new way that we can start to think by using the Dhamma, anicca doesn't mean, not, permanent. We're not, it's not a thing we get rid of. We just get rid of thinking of things as permanent and we're done. Yeah? It means actually seeing things as not permanent. And what does that mean? Well, we have to start looking at it like the way that we look at nature. We have to start thinking of things not as things that stay put in time, but we have to look at things as cycles. We have to see that the me, the morning me and the evening me are the same me. So we have to see the time that goes through. And we have to realize that me is energy me and low energy me. And me is everything in between. So we start thinking in terms of a cycle. I am not the energetic happy me, and I'm not the tired depressed me, but I am everything in between, and all of that is me along the way. Am I the young me or am I the old me? Well, it's all the me, yeah? It wasn't one thing. It was always changing all the time. My hair was growing and then I was cutting. And then it was growing and then I cut it. I styled it this way and then I styled it that way. Nothing really changed because it wasn't one thing, it was a pattern. And nature's been trying to teach this to us all along. The sun comes up and it goes down. And then it comes up the next day. We don't think much about it. But nature is trying to teach us that it's not about the things. It's not about that one bird. Because that one bird comes out of the egg and it grows up and it flies around for a while and it sings this nice little song. And then what is it? It just dies. It dies of old age. We can see this. And what do? Well, we start listening to the other bird. We don't even think. We just think birds, yeah? We don't think it's that one bird that was born last spring. We just think birds. It's just chirping, it's just in the background. But nature is trying to tell us, like, there isn't just one bird. Birds is a cycle. It's the cycle in spring when the birds are showing up. And it's the cycle in the fall when the birds are leaving. Coming and going and coming and going. And so we're learning to see the world in a totally different way. But it's a way that doesn't take any energy. For some people, this is very surprising. But if we look at those things that make us peaceful, those things that make us relaxed, we realize there's always something about cycles in them. People go to the ocean, yeah, and watch the waves. Well, what is that but a cycle? The waves come in and then the waves go out. When they're coming in, you don't go, ah! And when they're going out, you don't, no. But you see everything in between is the ocean. You're not losing it when it goes out. You're not getting it when it comes in. Because when it comes in, it's going to go out. When it goes out, it's going to come in. And it's the same with our breath, our body. The breath comes in. And if you think an in-breath is really good, then just try to hang on to it. It won't take long before it's not very good and you start turning blue. Now, breathing in is so good, yeah? Every doctor will tell you breathing in. I highly recommend, 10 out of 10 doctors recommend breathing in. But you can't just breathe in. You've got to also breathe out. And so it's a cycle. It's a cycle. Now, how is this so revolutionary? Well, can you see yourself as just a cycle? Can you see the being young and the being middle-aged and the being old as very normal. Well, if you could, then you would be seeing what it's like to be an enlightened being. Just free of suffering. Somebody is like, oh, you're getting older, your hair is going gray. And you're like, yeah, that's what happens. And we could say, well, doesn't that scare you? I was like, why? It doesn't scare me when the leaves fall off the trees, because I know they'll come back the next year. Or if, the tree out front dies, trees, no more trees. There's 10 feet away, there's another tree. And a new one will grow in that spot, and just cycles and cycles. Now, this is something that gets harder and harder to do the more we think about it, and the more we think of how deep this goes. So when we lose people, are we able to think about them like the birds? Are we able to think of it, well, people come and people go. Well, it's very hard, because they leave an empty spot when they go. With the birds, we don't think about them very much. We don't name them. We don't know their story, but with people, we do. Not just us, with the people in their lives. And so when they go, we're left with all of that story that we built up. And we realize that they weren't that story. We weren't seeing them as just a cycle. We were seeing them as so-and-so. So-and-so likes this, and they do this, and they listen to that kind of music. And we tell ourselves a story about them. But what we weren't telling ourselves is the cycle that they were, the pattern that they were. Yes, they like that kind of music, except when they're down, then they like that kind of music. Except when a new song comes out, then they like that kind of music, and they hum it for like days on end. And then they stop. Always changing, always changing. So what we're looking for is not just what they are, but what they have been and what they will be, and just seeing it's all the same thing. It's all just a pattern moving. When we start to think that way, then it's not so scary, because then we realize, oh, people are going to come and people are going to go, and that's very normal. And the moment it becomes normal, it stops being scary. We will still feel that grief when there's loss, but we'll also be able to appreciate that when there's loss, there's also a space that opens up for something new. And a member in the community who suffered a loss, miscarriage, and as it were, we were kind of discussing that while we were on alms rounds up in Massachusetts. And we happened to be talking with a woman who had a miscarriage, also very late in pregnancy. And the way she had chosen to deal with that was to name the child and have a funeral. So that's very interesting. And she's like, and I told my children about them. I said, this was your brother, They had a very short life, but it was very rich. We spent a lot of time together, him and I. I'm sorry you didn't get to meet him, but he was part of the family. And it's very interesting that this woman had a lot of time to think about that and process that. But because she had accepted it, she had also had to accept something that was a bit strange, is that she was actually grateful that this child wasn't in the world. And how could that be? Well, because she had another child after that. She had a third child after that. And she never would have had that third child if the one she lost had been born. And she really came to love that third child and to get to know that third child and be really happy that that third child is in the world. And yet at the same time, she knows that child never would have been born had there not been a space for them. And so that's pretty surprising. But isn't it the case that every birth in this world is preceded by a death? There'd be no room for more human beings if nobody died. And so it's just like the trees in the forest. One falls over and dies, but then that creates a space for another one to grow. It creates sunlight and water for it to grow. And so the pattern, begins to make more sense. This is what life is like. And it can be very scary, but it can be very powerful. And it's a new way of seeing the world. And it doesn't really like I've got to let go of my family. I've got to die to them. All of these things, to die before we die. It sounds really good, but actually, maybe we can live before we live. Maybe it doesn't have to be in the negative. Maybe we can realize that this moment we have is very rich because it's not one thing. We're flowing through different states, and we will keep flowing. So if right now we feel achy and tired and a little confused, well, that's okay. It's not going to be forever. We're just flowing through it. And when we start to think this way, we start to flow through states, even unpleasant states, then what happens is, for the first time in our lives, our suffering has a place. It's the other side of our happiness. And what we realize, and like I was saying about dukkha, the reason we don't see dukkha is because whenever we start to experience it, we move. We try to get away from it. We change our diet. We change where we live. We change our job. We change our car. We change our hairstyle. We change. We try to avoid it. But when we stop trying to avoid it, when we say, oh, in order to have happiness, I have to have the other side of that. In order to get something, there has to be a space, which means something else had to go. Well, then we're starting to see the whole pattern, and we're realizing what the Buddha called the currents, or the worldly winds, as they say in Tibetan. Gain and loss, pleasure, pain, success and failure, fame and disrepute, bad reputation. We have good times and we have bad times. Isn't it so interesting that those one leads to the other, leads back to the first? It's just a cycle. And we're just flowing through it. When we start to allow the suffering to be in our lives, and when we actually see it as, oh yeah, I'm just passing through it, well, then it has the opportunity to teach us, the opportunity to help us grow. And it sounds like, but I'd rather just not have it. I'd rather just not suffer. Well, as it turns out, the Buddha was trying to teach us how to not suffer. And the way to not suffer is to accept when things are unpleasant. As it turns out, pleasure and pain are just ways of the world. We're moving through them all the time. They're like the waves of the ocean. They're like our breath. Things feel good, then they don't feel good anymore. I've been accused of using ice cream as a simile a lot. I'm just going to go for it. You have one ice cream cone and it's good. You have two ice cream cones, it's not so good anymore. You have three ice cream cones and it's gross. And our whole lives is like that. We're just trying to find a middle path between, pleasure and pain. Too much pleasure can be scary too. It can be disturbing. It can be harder because it's hard to hang on to. But we sure try, but we won't succeed. And that is our suffering. But when we see these things as just coming and going, well, then all of the suffering disappears. And it's very much as simple a natural cycle as our breath. The more we start to pay attention to our breath, the more we realize it's not about having really good in-breaths or really good out-breaths, but it's about not resisting that flow, just letting it come and go. But that's actually what we're trying to do all the time. We're trying to be very specific. No, I want to be the energetic, happy person. Or no, I want to be the stable, calm, grounded person. And we don't see that they're the same person. We chase one and then we chase the other. All the time, it's the same us, the same pattern that's doing the chasing. and we just stopped chasing it, we'd see that the quickest way to get from the calm one to the energetic one is just wait until our energy comes back up. And the quickest way to get from the energetic one to the calm one is just to sit and wait until we calm down. And then the cycles actually happen very naturally if we let them. We're the thing that gets in the way. Our stories are the thing that gets in the way. And when we let those go, well, then there's just nature. And our difficulties have a place in that nature. They help all of this work. They help all of this make sense. And that's why monks actually, we talk about aging and sickness and death, and we talk about suffering. It's because we've learned to see those as quite natural. We even kind of like it. We'll sometimes hear monks talking about when their foot falls asleep. They're like, good, I can really feel my foot now. Yeah. Before it was just kind of like lukewarm. It was just kind of like really mild. But when it starts to hurt, it's like, oh, there it is. Yeah, I can feel all of it. I can feel all the muscles. I can feel all the blood vessels. That's great. That's much easier to pay attention to. Because it has a place. And we know that that foot, which hurts so much right now, will feel really good the second we stand up. So we don't need to rush to stand up. Because we know that'll come. And then someday we'll be sitting and it'll fall asleep. And then we'll get up and we'll be better. And just on, like the sun, like the moon, like the waves, like the wind and trees. And so these are just some thoughts and reflections to consider as you go about your lives. Maybe nothing will come of it, or maybe you'll be sitting waiting for a subway and you'll be like, oh, subways come, subways go, subways come. Oh, maybe you just see the cycles, yeah. Maybe a little bit of suffering will just subside. And if so, then that would be good. That would be worth all the legs falling asleep and not getting to bed quite as early as you could have. Because that's kind of what the Uposatha is like. It's that day when we do a little extra, even the stuff that's a little unpleasant. Why? Well, because we'll feel good having done it. Because we know one is the other side of the other. So, I'll give you thoughts for your.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bhante.
So, if there are any questions or comments or answers, feel free. And the online group can also chime in. If anybody has to go, would like to get up. I know you all lead busy lives. I do know it is hard to sleep in the city, though. So don't tell me you're going to go back to sleep, because I know it's not true.
There's no such thing as living in
the city.
Venice clubs.
Right? There is in the forest, I tell you, when the sun goes down at 6 o'clock, by 9 o'clock, you're ready to go to bed.
My exams.
It's also open to anyone who might have. Yeah.
And then, sometimes like the Buddha say, everything is anicca, right? Even the monk and the lay people, we know already, but especially for the lay people, sometimes easy to say, right? At the time, the hip, the bottom, it's really, really, we cannot handle that. So regarding for the test for the hour, like a lay people, what we're supposed to do to make a strong our mind, and then our heart to at the time, something came out, we cannot handle that. Like for example, we lost someone, we love. Yeah. So what we should do, to face it that case, someday, soon or later, it happen with us.
Yes.
Right? And then, so what we should do for the everyday,
So I think I think the question, if I can try to rephrase it, is just what do we do when we suffer a loss? Yeah. And so the difference, lay people, you might not be able to face it, and how do you come to face it? Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, we weren't born monks. So I know it's hard. We're not saying that it won't be hard. In fact, we're saying it will be hard. And we're actually kind of saying that to make it easier. Because if you know it's going to be hard, then when it's hard, you're like, well, okay, I was told it was going to be hard. Yeah. So what do you do? Well, the first thing is it's like the tree losing its leaves. Yeah. You don't have to be a superhuman when you've suffered a loss. You can cry. You can be sad. The Buddha was sad when he lost Sariputta and Moggallana. And he looked at the Sangha, which was full of great monks, and he said, oh, it looks empty. Because he had lost his best friend that he'd been with for so long. And now the Buddha was also strong, and that's how we remember, strong monks. We're just like, yes, I knew they were going to die. The Buddha knew they were going to die, but they were still his friends. He was still sad. So, you can be sad. But what you're doing before you suffer the loss is thinking like, well, what are those things that will help me in that time? Because when I might not be able to be strong. Yeah. But if you've built up things like friends or support or good Dhamma talks, all of these things, then you will have them at that time. And
well, the last theme that you talked about really struck me as how I would answer the question. We prepare our minds before the worst comes. In the way that you're preparing right now, you're building your community. Like you said, sometimes it's just too much and you're overwhelmed. And at that time, well, you have people around you to hold you up, your beautiful family, your friends, your community, and to remind you of what you know and what you're practicing right now. Forgiveness, patience, hope, faith. Those are the qualities that we train with. We train with as a community. We practice when we practice the precepts. Those are all exercises and all of those wholesome qualities, the paramis. And that's our reservoir. When those don't see us through, then the people around us see us through. And like Bhante was saying, we don't expect ourselves to be perfect, to not feel grief, to not experience loss, to not experience pain, but we train so that we can recover and be resilient. And we have faith that we can come through. That's what I would add. And this has been, a very difficult time. Many of us have lost people just in the past months. And we think about Melinda's loss, Andy and Melinda's loss, and Gwen's loss. I think that story about the woman that Bhante met is quite a beautiful one, although it's a different story for each person who suffers such a loss. I was at the Thai temple a couple of months ago. I don't know if any of you went to the funeral for that young woman who died, a woman in her early 20s who died in a traffic accident, a very bright, young, capable person with lots of friends, like the brightest future, and she was killed by just a random traffic accident. And the devastation of her family was just, it was overwhelming. And you could see that the people were overwhelmed. At the same time, you could see that, they were holding each other up. And that the woman's life, no life is wasted. Even when a life ends very young, that life is not wasted. there's, I mean, even with Melinda, think of the good that came from her pregnancy, the good qualities that she showed, that she cultivated, the good intentions that she brought into the world. It's all positive. That'll help Aurelia Ivory. They did name the child. That's her name. And hope, faith, friendship, love. Those are the qualities that help us meet those challenges.
It's a good question, and all of the teachings are said they're not like commandments, like you have to do this. It's just the Buddha saw the suffering of the world. That's where his teachings came from. So the chants, the Brahma, Chaloka, Dipati, the Buddha didn't just go out and be like, yeah, people need some Dhamma. I'm going to give them some Dhamma and just start teaching Dhamma. He was sitting there and he was thinking, it's very hard to teach what I've discovered. You know, I have found this freedom, but it's very subtle. But then the Brahma, came down, Sahampati, and he said, people are suffering. Out of compassion, teach. Some people will get it, and that's what it is. It's just passing, down the line. Some people get it, and we look to them for inspiration. And that's what we're doing. It's what you're doing, and that's what people in your lives will do. To everything, you might be like, I'll be a mess, if I lose so and so. Well, maybe. There's no way we can know, because we don't know when that will happen. We might actually get a lot of time to prepare. Our circumstances might change, and that's quite strange. But we know people who would have been absolutely devastated if they had lost a spouse, early on, when they were raising their kids. But then they grow old and they're like, yeah, so and so will die any day now. It'll be okay. Somebody gets new kittens, and like, oh, it's nothing better than kittens, yeah. And then one of them develops a very serious illness, and they're like, I hope they pass on. Their life is very painful right now. I hope they have a better rebirth. Yeah? And this is nothing is set in stone, yeah? And how we feel might change.
That's the part about hope. I would have one thought about what you were saying about how things in Pali are phrased in the negative. Like we cultivate the intention of non-ill will. So the not having the ill will, and not having cruelty, not having hatred. Bhante is saying, well, yeah, we also want to cultivate the positive side of that. Think about the positive side of it. But sometimes when you're just overwhelmed, it's enough to just notice the overwhelm and just step back from it just a little bit. Maybe it's enough just to not completely hate what's happening. Just to open the door just the tiniest bit to saying, okay, this is terrible. The feeling is absolutely awful, but I don't have to give in to hate. I don't have to be overwhelmed by it. And practicing meditation is a really, really great preparation for that. Being able to just take the edge off it by not being overwhelmed by the passions of hatred and grief and sorrow. I mean, it happens, and we come out of it naturally. But when we can see it a little bit, even that can really help.
Some questions? Anywhere?
Any thought from Bande Sumano and Bande Tānakāro about being fully ordained? I'd like to hear.
Question of the day. Bante, you can go first. I went first earlier.
So it's not the first time you've been asked this question.
Does it feel different, Bante?
Does it feel different? I mean, you just called me Bante. I didn't think you were talking to me. It's weird. It's like, oh, it's me, right? I'm still me, right? But then there's also, oh, right, I've got these brown robes on. There's this in a new position entirely, being perceived in a whole different way. So something I'm still sort of trying to understand. It's only been it's been 2 days. No, it's been a day. It's been a day. And some change. There's no magic wand that touched my head when I put on robes. The kilesas didn't gone. Freedom, there's a story related to the Dhammapada where a Samanera, no less, child, little boy, is having his head shaved. And the moment the razor touches his hair, Arahant, fully awakened being. Didn't happen.
For the future, probably.
Well, it grows back though, so there's always.
This next time.
Next time, maybe.
That's if you a step ahead than us. I mean, like we all human, like we learn, but at least like you take the step towards the what we want to achieve. Even
Big
if
leap.
people- Yes, take a leap.
Yes.
And it's great.
It's good karma, but
It's
they
very good.
Yes, and this community is able to say that. It takes an incredible amount of courage, yeah,
Yeah.
because this community doesn't have many of its people shaving their head and becoming monks. And it's not that you have any less faith. It's not a measure of faith in the Buddha Dhamma. Well, it takes something extra. It takes in the positive. You have to have also the courage. So it's very. It is really special.
Takes parami as well
Yeah.
in the previous lives.
Even now, I want it also. It's not gonna be happen.
What?
That's why, because some, like we said, the parami is not there yet.
Wow.
Even you want it,
That's
the
a
way
big
is not open yet.
That's what you see. It's not like a gas tank, yeah. You're not just filling up on metta parami and then it gets to the top and you can drive all the way to nibbana. It's a process. Yeah. If you're trying to have metta, then that's what the perfections are.
It comes to the right time, and the fruit of your karma, or when you repent, then you can be a monk, take a leap. Because like not everyone has a chance to do that. For example, for me, if I want to be a monk right now, well, I still have responsibility. So it's different circumstances. So.
Yeah, and that, So on the one hand, there's the qualities from within, and on the other, there's the karma of your life.
Yes. So something to be celebrated to become a monk.
And just before Bhante Sumano answers, and say that also kind of went into my thinking of my talk tonight. Because seeing monks take the robes is very special, yeah. When I was very young, it was so special I couldn't let it go. And when monks wanted to disrobe, it was very shocking. It was very scary. And, you would sit with them and you'd be like, "We'll do anything it takes, just for you to stay in the robes." And it was very hard because it's just like having somebody die. because I couldn't see these as just cycles. But then I looked at my teachers, and after they had seen enough people come and enough people go, they started to realize it's not about the person being in the robes, it's about the things they do. And the things they do before they get into robes are just as important as the things they do when they're in the robes, and just as important as the thing they do when they get out of the robes again. It's all about the continuity and the intention that's going into it. An actual physical form is not that important. So my teacher and somebody like I thought was a really good monk would be disrobing, and my teacher would be like, "Yeah, it happens." And I'd be like, "Oh no, but not to him. No, he's the treasure of the sangha. Why are you not trying harder?" And then somebody who didn't seem like they would be a very good monk, it seemed like I had so many defilements. It was like, "Oh, we can't let that guy in." But that guy is still there, and he's grown so much. Yeah. And so, the ground is not spitting the seeds of the trees up that it doesn't want. It's like, no, I don't want an oak tree here. No, it's just fertile ground, and that's what our world is. It's just fertile ground, and some things will grow. Yeah. So, Bhante Sumano.
And then online, some people said, "Congratulations on the ordainment." They said to both of you, and someone said, "Sorting Hat in Harry Potter, monk." If you're familiar with Harry Potter. And Andrew says, "May you practice well, Tānakāro." Interesting. Yeah. Well, I was a Samanera before. Yeah, people, ask, how does it feel? And there's a lot of excitement. And it's interesting because I remember even at my Samanera ordination, I think everyone around me was more excited than me. I was just really nervous. And I think somewhat similarly this time around in that like all the, a lot of coordination and everything's going on and there's things you have to memorize and everybody, pictures and talking and this and that. And I'm just trying to kind of be like, okay, just, relax or whatever. So I think still processing, but it feels right, feels meaningful. And we were talking to Ajahn Tawin earlier today, and you've probably heard him say, he was, what did he say? Just relax, be happy, or something like that. What was it?
He said, "Don't worry, be happy."
Don't worry, be happy. It's also, yeah. But when we were sitting in front of him, he was like, yeah, it's just, you take one step, then the other, one step, then the other. There's no timeline. There's no, I have to achieve this. There's no, I have to do things this way. And that was nice. And it's just like, oh, yeah, just practicing. New form. And, like Tan Santi was saying, it's not an individual effort. So there's a community of fellow monks, but then there's also the lay community that supports the monastic community as well. And it's very beautiful.
So, when we're talking about the benefit of meditations and coming back to what you said earlier about looking things like a flow, and there's a many side of one thing, not just one side of things. For example, like losing somebody, it meant to be. Sooner or later, we're gonna lose somebody. So the thing is, like, we understand that it's anicca, it's meant to happen. It's gonna happen eventually, for sure. But sometimes the anticipations of like, okay, it's gonna happen, but we don't know when, but you have to be prepared. So like, it's crippling in the head. Sometimes it causes us very worry. Because like we see that family for example, oh, they got the lottery already. They lose somebody, and we look somebody else. Oh, they got it already. So we just waiting for our turn to get that turn. Like eventually we're gonna lose somebody, or something's gonna happen to us. So like the amount of worry. Sometimes I don't realize it, but sometimes I realize it. So like it's frightening. Like okay, feels like okay, it's gonna happen. I don't know when. So it's that's why I say that it's really important to calm myself down with meditations.
Yeah.
But sometimes with meditations too, it's kind of hard to anticipate, knowing that it will happen. You know what I mean?
You know, I wonder if you've really, if it might be helpful. It might be helpful, I think, to really contemplate refuge. The Tisarana. Where are you looking for refuge? I guess is the question to investigate as you reflect and as you meditate. Because it sounds like you're looking for refuge in those happy moments, in those safe, secure, happy relationships that you know are going to end.
Yeah.
So you've gone the first step. You're recognizing, oh my God, none of this is secure. None of this is trustworthy. But you're still looking for safety and happiness in it. So the first step is a scary one. And you've already taken that step. It's seeing that it's not reliable. I can't close my eyes anymore and pretend that everything's fine and nothing bad's ever going to happen. I know something bad is going to happen. To me, the next step, though, is to think, okay, where can I find refuge? Where can I find safety? Where can I find like something really trustworthy that's never going to disappear, never going to fail me? And that's what, that's what the Dhamma offers us. But it's not simple. It's what is well, in English, it's subtle, it's deep, it's profound, it's hard to see. But when you find it, when you really cultivate it deeply, it's a refuge that you can trust, that you can rely on.
Sometimes when I feel like kind of overwhelmed, I'm beside like Kamayuni, Kamabandi, Kamapatisarana. It's like, okay, it happens, it's like it's karma, your karma is gonna happen. Well, still trying to manage that like day by day, because like going towards like I'm not getting younger, I'm getting older. So when time you're growing older, you start to think, okay, it's creating closer, not getting farther. So it's it's in the back of my mind. Every happiness, every good moment, it's always like something like not gonna last.
Yeah, it's the worm in the apple.
Yes.
It's the expression.
Yes.
Yeah, so the thing to know though is that the Buddha also encouraged looking at the affects, like the results of what we're cultivating. There's no one, if there was just one thing that we cultivated that would work, then he would just tell everybody to just do that one thing, just reflect on this one thing. But we have to look, sometimes looking at things one way might be productive of anxiety. Then that's not the thing that's not wisdom to be looking at it in that way at that time. So focusing, the one prime example is doubt. So the cause of doubt is focusing on things that you can't know. What's the future? What's the past? What's the result of this? What will I be when I die? You can't know those things. So just trying to think about them creates more doubt. It eats away at the certainty you have. So the Buddha, one of his simple little teachings is he said, death is certain, life is uncertain. All beings die, but not all beings live. Well, you can say, okay, I've got to pay attention to death, but then he's also saying the positive. He's saying the life is very precious there. You weren't guaranteed that. The time you have with that person was not guaranteed. None of it's guaranteed. So if you have it right now, it's actually a gift. Yeah? And that's something you can know. That's not an unknown. If you focus on the death, you don't know how long you've got with them. But if you focus on the life, you know that you have them right now. And not cultivating depth, that's cultivating, metta, compassion, mudita, equanimity. You're like, there is this person in my life. I know that. How am I relating to them? Because if you related to them in a pure way, then there wouldn't be fear. Actual metta has no attachments. Actual compassion has no pity. Actual mudita has no envy. Equanimity has no fear. So, you can look at this and you can think about this and recognize that we know that we are the owners of our karma, but we don't know what our karma is. And you can say it feels like every day death is getting closer, and yet you still don't know what that distance is. And since it's an unknown, you don't reflect on that. Yeah? The appreciation of death is actually meant to be an appreciation. Yeah, it's meant to make you feel more connected to the things, rather than worry that you're going to lose things. Yeah.
It doesn't happen to me like often, but it's just sometimes because it's when it happens to somebody else, or it happens to me like also like I lose my dad, I lose my mom. Those feeling is familiar, so it's kind of like, oh, okay. It's just like in the back of my mind, what's next? Like,
but there's no guarantee. That's the weird thing about the world is there's no guarantee that you are next. Like, it's not fair. It is just like that's what the first noble truth is. Life is not fair. It's not going to happen even. You might have a fantastic long life. You don't know. As it's funny, I think we have a Dhamma teacher who looked after his mother when she was late in life. She was in her 90s, and she would smoke cigarettes all day long. And now we know that cigarettes cause lung cancer, right? Mm-hmm. Except not to this 90-year-old woman. And she would be, she would just be there, and she was dying of something else completely, but she was dying very slowly. And everybody would be like, you smoke so much, you've got to stop. And she's like, no, you don't understand. Smoked meat lasts a long time. So the things that we think are certain may not be that certain. Yeah, you don't know that you're going to have disaster befall you. Well, and if you practice long enough and you accept that everything is part of a natural flow, then when something does happen, it might not even feel like a disaster. And that's what's trying to be taught. Like, it could be sad, but you'd be like, wow, it's kind of something was going to happen. That's not the worst thing that could happen. It can be okay. As I said, we're leaving a place for suffering. Yeah, something will come up sooner or later, but it may not be the death of a loved one. It may just be the death of a car, which is, some people it's a really big deal, but not it. That's what karma is like sometimes. So actually, the Buddha says that is one of the benefits of cultivating the Brahma Viharas of metta, compassion, mudita, equanimity, is that you're expanding their capacity of what you can take. And so something that otherwise would have seemed really big is just a drop in a big heart. And what happens when you cultivate a big heart is you become a resource for others. Because everybody is having these disasters. But if you've got a really big heart, then you can help them hold that disaster, because it won't seem so big to you. So that's something you can do right now. It doesn't involve focusing on anything that's unknown. It's just focusing on what is known. The good stuff you can do right now.
Maybe we are too much attached with something we like or we love.
Exactly.
Yeah, don't do that.
That's why I try to do now.
Yeah.
Attachment.
Yeah, very, very hard when trying to.
Yes. Yeah. No, I am.
That's what he's talking about.
Yeah.
And I'm just joking by saying don't do it. It's like we're all attached to something.
Yeah.
It's the famous monk. was enlightened many, many years ago, was asked about death. And he's like, yeah, you know, when you, to the level of a fully enlightened being, when you see into the mind, you realize that the fear of death is like this shell that's always around the heart. And most of the time we're dealing with things much more on the surface. You know, the loss of a loved one is much more, it's still something outside of ourselves. Even if we got ready for that, we wouldn't be ready for the loss of ourselves. Our name, our place in the world, our own death. And so there's so many levels to it. You work wherever you can do the work. There's no expectation that you do the work at this level right now, or that you go on meditation retreat, or that you sit and reflect on all of your loved ones dying. If it doesn't produce good results, then don't do it. Yeah. But you know, focus on something. Yeah. Even if it's just the tree in your front yard dying, you can look at it, and that's what we're saying. Everything is showing the same anicca, dukkha, anatta. Everything has it. So you can learn it anywhere. It doesn't have to be the things that are too close.
Contemplations every time.
Yeah, well, so now we're just talking away because we're going to be up for another 2 hours. So we're not feeling particularly crashed, but it's really been good to see you all.
Thank you.
Looking forward to the next time that I say that I'm in the community, but now you've just given birth to 2 more old baby mums. Your community's growing. Yeah.
And you know, let's express our gratitude too to the community for helping us to get these guys in robes and underway in the holy life. It's extremely meritorious act to help a couple of young people become monks. It's well done.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. But we do have some donation for you guys, monastery, and also for the transport, Bante. It is all from the Indonesian family.